Welcome to Anecdotes for Success with Matt and Paul. Storytelling is an art form, emphasizing the value and learning that is created through personal experience. Our purpose is to share these stories and experiences with the listener. Everyone has a powerful testimony. Let's use them to level up to our best life with truth, meaning, trade-offs, and perspective.
Big shout out to Isaac Mather for the new podcast intro. You can check Isaac's music out on all socials or directly at isaacmathermusic.com. Okay, we have Monte on tonight. Syrie, I said it correct, right?
Yes, sir.
Fellow educator. Besides 5 minutes ago when we met on Zoom, we've never spoken before. And I'm going to have you talk about yourself, and you can start way back as far as you want to go about how you became an educator. And I'm going to get into some things I know you tweet about that I love, and we can talk about all things education and whichever way the wind blows us. But
Okay, love that.
take us away where you want to start. Tell us about yourself.
Well, Paul, thank you for having me. I love to talk education, so it's an honor to be here. And as far as my history with education, I had a kiddo who just asked me this morning, like, "Sai, why'd you decide to become a teacher?" And I paused for a moment, and I have my pad. I had great teachers' response, yada yada yada. But really, for me, Paul, I think the reason I became an educator is because of what school was for me as a student. And it's because I did have those great teachers. I had a little bit of a rough childhood, with divorce and poverty and some other things. And, school was that place of stability and safety for me. And the longer I was in it, the more I loved it, and the more I began to realize that school is such an important part of our kids growing up in our nation. And I think on some level, I just never really wanted to leave, and I wanted to be a part of that, and so I became a teacher. And of course, I have to give a nod to Mr. Hamrick, my 8th grade language arts teacher. And I shared this with the kiddo who asked me today, like why I became a teacher. And the thing that stood out for me for Mr. Hamrick was that he treated us like real people. And I'm not to say that teachers don't, right? I mean, they do, but like, it was the first time I felt like we were on level with him a little bit, and we could talk about anything, and he related to us, and he was kind of young and cool and hip. And I thought, you know what? I think it'd be kind of cool to be a teacher. And so that kind of, decided it for me there. And here I am 28 years later as an educator. So.
That's awesome. And it's ELA, right? English language
ELA,
arts.
yes. Yep.
Yeah. What grade?
Well, geez, I started in 7th grade. I taught 7th grade my first year, and then I did 8th grade for 6 years after that. And then I moved up to the high school because I moved back home here. And I've taught all grade levels, primarily 10th grade up to this year, but this year I have all seniors. So it's kind of a new experience for me. And I got to say, we're a week and a few days in here, and I'm loving working with seniors. So I think it's an important stepping off point for kids into the next stage of their life. I was going to say the real world, but I caught myself there because they're already in the real world, right? So, but it's an important stepping off stage for them to move into the next chapters of their lives, and I'm really excited to be a part of it this year.
I think that's great. We have more in common. I've been teaching seniors for the last 20 years, and
Nice.
Middle school, God bless you, it takes a lot of energy, right?
They're just kids, though. You would do just fine, Paul. I tell my high school kids the only difference between them and middle school kids is they're just a little taller. So,
I did spend a few years coaching middle school girls basketball. So,
well,
obviously
bless
not
you
the
for
same,
that.
not the same
Yeah.
as the classroom, but I had to dial back the sarcasm a little bit.
Yeah.
They don't quite get it, but
Yeah.
it was fun. So like I said, we'll get talking about some other things. So I have a computer over here, so I can have I don't have a producer, so the computer's over here. And if you see me writing a lot, I don't name the podcast or a bio about the podcast till afterwards. So
Nice.
I take all these notes because I don't know. I think we have an idea what we're going to talk about, but who knows, right? So
Right.
I I first was attracted to your Twitter account. I forget what you call it. Oh, right here, daily discussion. It just showed up.
Yes. Yep.
You do that every day?
Every single day. Today's daily discussion question was, what does it mean to live a life well lived? So I do that every single day. It's how we start our day.
And do they write it on paper or do they just
We
discuss
do.
it with each other?
So our typical approach is the kids come in, they have a document that they keep for the entire week, and on there they have to respond to the daily discussion question. So first they have to step into it on their own, and as I'm taking attendance, as we're getting things going, they write down their response. After smiles and frowns, then we do turn and talk. So the kids then share once they've had a little bit of time to process and think about it, and then from there we go into class conversation. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 minutes. Sometimes, like today, it took almost 15 minutes. It just depends on the discussion and how much enthusiasm it generates.
What I like already about hearing that, I mean, I I read your daily discussions all the time. I think it's fantastic, but you don't technically have a timeline attached to it, do you?
I don't. And those who have followed me, on the board there, I give a prescribed time allotment. I do 1 minute for the write it down, the 1 minute for turn and talk, and then the 3 minutes for the class conversation. Because I know not everybody has either the luxury or the courage, I suppose, on some level, to let it go long, despite all the content that we have to go through. So I think it's good for those who want to do the daily discussion, who need those parameters. But those are just very general guidelines for me, and I just go with the flow. As I said, this morning's or today's generated a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of interest from the kids, and so we go for it. And I say sorry, not sorry, to any who think that I'm not using my class time wisely by spending it talking with kids and listening to kids.
I might be putting my foot in my mouth here. We look technically the same age, and I'm starting my 27th year of teaching.
Okay.
Uh, I think you've been about that long too, right?
Yeah, this is my 28th year, so we're
Oh, okay.
we're just about on the same page here, Paul.
And what's amazing, I mean, I'm sure I'm dipping into having students of students now, of course.
Hmm.
Uh, or you go out to a restaurant and you see people that are, I mean, if I'm 51, the first students I had could be 40 or
Yep.
plus,
Oh yeah.
and no one ever talks about the curriculum that we went over in class. I feel like the stories are priceless, and it always has something to do with. I've had kids used to keep track of silly sayings I said, or rap verses, or song lyrics, or anything. But it's usually about something that made them how safe they felt or how they felt in the
Yeah.
classroom.
Yeah.
Do you get the same type of reaction? Because I feel you do based on your account.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I'm sure you as well probably follow some former students, or they follow you on social media, and so I connect with kids, now as adults on Facebook that I had, back in 96 and 97. And so it's through that, because a lot of times, those kids are off and they're living in different parts of the world, but because of social media, we've been able to stay connected. And I think that that's really what makes us, lifetime teachers. We're teachers for a kid's lifetime, because now they truly are able to stay connected with us. And time and time again, when kids pipe in with comments, it's never about, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we covered this particular content in class. It's almost always about how they felt as a human, the things that they remember, like you're saying, like the silly sayings that we do, the memories, most of which have had very little to do with the in the book content. All right. Now, I would argue that kids are our content. And so if we are, connecting with kids, and those connections are continued throughout their lifetime, as they reiterate to us when they do connect with us later on, we're doing the right things. I think the most, like I mentioned smiles and frowns just a moment ago, and maybe maybe you don't, but I start every single period with smiles and frowns, no matter what. And that's just a quick go around the room. Kids share a smile, they share a frown, or importantly, they pass. And yes, that takes, quote, instructional time, but I tell my kids, of all that we're going to learn this year, there is nothing more important than learning each other. And so we start with each other. We start with the humans in the room, because there's nothing more important in the room than the humans. I can't teach kids if I don't know kids. And I make an intentional effort every single day to know my kids through smiles and frowns.
So,
And
so,
I think,
oh,
go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
no, no, go ahead. I was done. So go ahead.
But no, so the smiles and frowns, because I would have colleagues that would say that sounds so elementary or middle schoolish. Now you've been doing this with your seniors too.
Oh yeah, and they sing the Smiles and Frowns song with me too. I can sing it for you if you want me to.
It, be my guest. I would love to hear it.
So imagine, if you will, a room full of seniors every day singing this song. And I'll pay tribute to Fred Rogers, because it's based on the "It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood." It's a beautiful day for smiles and frowns. Won't you share your ups and downs? Won't you share? We all care. Won't you share your story? And we start every smiles and frowns with that. And so, yeah, I've heard the elementary, but I tell you what, kids dig it, kids love it, and um, they would have a revolt if I ever said, "Hey guys, sorry, we've got too many other important things to do. We're not doing smiles and frowns today." They would revolt. It means that much to them.
Well, it makes you vulnerable too. I think that's very important part of being a teacher in the classroom. Like we're not all knowing, right? We're not all, I mean, we're not statues. We're not always stoic. We have our ups and downs too. And so sharing, if you can get a classroom where everybody trusts each other and you're not afraid to be vulnerable, because I would think that would be hard for some of them at first to buy into.
It is. It is. Particularly, they're looking around the room, and a
Yeah,
lot of them, as they don't even know each other,
right.
right? Or they've been in classes together for 4 years, and they don't even know each other's names. And it's always funny to me, because kids look around the room. It's like, I'm not going to share. I don't even know these people. But by the end of the year, Paul, and I kid you not, to a person, the kids will go from saying we're a class to we're a family, not just we're a community, but we're a family. In terms of developing empathy, which I think is a superhuman skill to have, now and later and always. I think smiles and frowns is one of the very best ways to get at that super important skill that we should all have as human beings. Just for instance, for today, as far as being vulnerable, my parents are getting older. My dad is in really, really bad shape right now. And this weekend took a turn for the worse. And my day now consists of going down to my parents' house at least 3 times a day to help get him up so my mom can change his diaper. I mean, and I shared that with my kids today. And, they were so empathetic about it and so mature about it. And so, like, just with me in it, and this is the 5th day of school. And so this gives me an opportunity to really show them who I am as a human, and it opens up the door for them to be able to show who they are as human beings as well.
Yeah, and if you don't do it, and I'm sorry to hear about your father. I mean,
Yeah, it's
it's
been
the
a long
circle.
time coming. It's just, it sucks to get old, dude.
Yeah, it's the circle of life. I mean,
It
and
is. It is.
but even sharing that to take a positive out of it. I don't mean to
Yeah.
sound sick.
No, no, no. Yeah.
They kids. I bet you there's kids nobody talks about that aspect of life, or
Yeah.
uh, everybody. Especially with younger kids today, they constantly have to put their best face forward on social
Yeah.
media.
Right.
They're afraid to show anything vulnerable. They're afraid to really talk about things that go wrong. And I think sometimes that's where all the anxiety comes from. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not going to say depression, but
Sure.
I think just the way I can already tell I would love your class just by the way you started out. I might drag my feet for a week, but I would sing the song eventually.
Well, and and I said when I was explaining it to you, the thing that I think is really super important if people are going to do this activity, and again, I call it smiles and frowns. People call it happies and crappies, roses and thorns. I mean, it's nothing new, right? Like I didn't invent
Right, right.
this. But I think what's super important is that you honor the pass, right? You allow kids to pass, no pressure. I even pass sometimes
Okay.
just to honor that right that we have. Because again, as with most things that I do, and is with all things I do in my room, I don't want kids compliance. I want kids commitment, and I want them committing to smiles and frowns because they want to do smiles and frowns, that they see the value in it, not because some teacher is making them share aloud in class in front of their peers. And even my perpetual passers, I've had kids who don't share once for the entire year, but when we talk about smiles and frowns, particularly at the end, they're always like, oh no, you have to do it. It's super important because it's not just about sharing, it's also about listening. And they get to participate in smiles and frowns as listeners, even if they're not the ones who share. And so they simply pass. And the other thing that I think is super cool about smiles and frowns and doing it the way I do it, Paul, is I get to say, I intentionally acknowledge each kid every morning by saying their name. Even my kids who I know are going to pass, I would still say Paul, and give Paul that opportunity to pass. Kids, like humans, we like to be acknowledged. We like to hear our name.
Yep.
And it's
That's
beyond just like, are you here today? It's like, it's more of like, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. You're a member of this community. Would you like to share anything with us?
there's kids that can literally go through a whole school day and no one ever actually talks to them personally,
Yeah.
right? Teachers do, and it might just take one conversation to open somebody up or to
Yeah.
to get them going. I want to talk about grades, if that's
Yeah.
okay for a
Let's do
little
it.
bit. And I know, I don't want to say you're not a big proponent of grades, but tell me about your philosophy, your
Okay.
grading policies, and how you treat that. I don't want to speak for you. That's why I'm going to have
Yeah.
just leave it as an open question.
Oh my gosh. Well, we may need to do 5 or 6 episodes then,
Yeah.
Paul. So I am not a proponent of grading. Grades in and of themselves, are a necessary evil
Yep.
in our system. Um, Grading is where I seem to have issues, and I always find myself grinding on grading. And I think that the reason I don't wake up in the morning and say like I want to send out a bad tweet about grading today, right? Um,
Right.
I wake up in the morning thinking about learning, as a lot of teachers do, as most of us do. And too often, Paul, I find that grading gets in the way of learning, authentic learning in my classroom. And, I'm going to lose track here. 6 or 7 years ago, when I started Project 180, it was grading that I first wanted to tackle, because I found that it got in the way of learning. And so for that first year, I mean, this is radical and I don't recommend this to many, but the first year of Project 180, I gave all my kids an A for the entire year. I had handcrafted wooden A's that summer, spray painted them black. As they walked in the door on the very first day of school, I said hello and handed each of them an A. They had no idea why I was handing them an A. And then shortly after the bell had rung, we talked about the A and what that was going to mean for them for the entire year. And the reason I did that, and I told them, it's your A. You get an A at the end of the year, end of the term, on your transcript, no matter what. And the reason I did that is because I didn't feel like I could really dig into learning until I set grades to the side. And so to do that, I gave the kids a grade and said, okay, now an A. Now we have 180 days. What are we going to do? Are we going
How
to make something? Go ahead.
how'd they respond to that by the end of the
Just
year?
by the end of the year, as I write in my book, many of them found it to be one of the most remarkable learning years they'd ever experienced because they didn't have to worry about grades. And these were honors kids. So at the time, I was teaching honors kids, and so they were my grade grubbers anyway. And as I started teaching honors, I realized that grading was even more in the way with our honors kids than with
Yeah.
our quote regular kids. And so I said, fine, we're going to take care of this. We're not going to worry about grades. Here's your A for the year, done, settled. We have an opportunity now. We have 180 days together. Let's do something with it. Let's learn. And learn we did.
I well, you struck a chord. Well, I love that personally, but you struck a chord with the honors kids. So I teach a program called New Visions through a vocational school. I go to 8 different school districts. We don't have county school districts. Some school districts might have as few as a
And
thousand
where are
kids.
you again, Paul? Where are you again? Remind me.
Upstate New York, south of
Okay, New York.
Syracuse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I go to 8 different school districts. I recruit kids, and then as juniors, they apply. I interview them. I only take the top 34 kids, and they drive to my class every day. I have them either from 9 to 11 in the morning or 12 to 2 in the afternoon. Embedded in what we do, they get 19 college credits on professionalism, personal finance, public speaking, but they don't sit for that class time. It's just included in what we do. And it's the grades are the same way. There's nothing hard that we do in class, but the stuff that trips them up is being places on time, knowing what dress code when we go on internships, understanding when you write a resume, I'm giving you 100 when it's finally done, but it
Yeah.
might take you 25 times to do it. Like,
Right.
and honors kids especially get so caught up in perfection when you hang that grade over them, they don't do as good a work as I feel they could do if you just get it out of the way and say, here's your A. Am I wrong?
Right. Right. Right.
So the grading just gets in the way. Like the fact that even in early education, we have standardized tests and all this focus on grades. And we used to have something in New York called Regents exams.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where,
No, we've all
yeah.
heard about it.
Oh, yeah.
You
So
guys
when
are
I took,
you guys are world famous.
yeah, when I taught ninth and 10th grade social European history, which is a really tough concept to teach a ninth or 10th grader about the history of the world, right? Yet alone their community. Kids would fail their world history classes for not having notes done. So I said, well, let's just get that out of the way. I typed up all the notes and just handed it to them. And then I left spaces for them to write down the stories that we talked about, the videos that we saw. And then when it came time to take these regents, they could tell stories and write essays and they'd pass
Right.
with glowing colors. But
I love that.
what do I do? I had to do extra research because I didn't have well, I'm dating myself, the overhead projector where you have it black and you just pull it down one line at a time, right? Like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do? I just already gave them. Some kids are doodling, some kids are highlighting words and I'd still get the questions like, is this going to be on the test? Is this going to
Yep.
be on the test? And it's
Yeah.
like, what are you doing as a society when kids are going to school to worry about what's going to be on a test,
Yeah.
right? So
You
I
know,
love the whole concept of what you're doing.
yeah, and I don't blame kids for
Right.
how they respond within the grading paradigm, if you will, because they've been conditioned, right? Um, and it takes a long time for those of us who are trying to kind of venture out and try new things to decondition or detrain those kids, and unfortunately by the time like you and I are both doing seniors right now, it's just like, what do you do, right? Like we can't send them back to kindergarten. I mean, not that I would ever do that, but it's just like, it's like, so we have to do the best we can in the small amount of time that we have. And I think that's true for all levels, Paul. Is just we can only do the best we can in really, if we're honest about it, the very, very short amount of time that we have with our young humans, you know.
How
Um,
long are your classes? Is it block
um,
scheduling? Is it
Well, geez, what a nightmare it's been. So we went to kind of a wonky block schedule where we only had 4 periods a day, but it wasn't a modified block, and so I only had my kids for half a year. So
okay?
the idea was if we make the periods twice as long, you're going to cover twice the amount of content. We all know that's a bunch of BS. So all it resulted in is my having my kids for a half of a year, and you just so you take a small amount of time and you make it even smaller, and it's just like one can only do so much, and kids can only
Yeah.
do so much.
How's your school feel about the way you grade?
There's not been any pushback, Paul, and
Good,
I
good.
expect there to be a ton of pushback. And I'm not doing crazy things now
Right.
with like giving kids an A. I mean, I've gone to, I went to select and support. It's an ever evolving, how do I make learning better? And so I know I grind on grading, but I'm always leaning towards learning, like how do I make learning better? And again, I find more often than not, I really have to be intentional about how I grade kids. And I expected some pushback that first year. I kind of wanted to get jiggy with it. I mean, that's why I gave kids an A. I wanted that pushback because I was going to demand then that if they were going to put their nose in my grading policies, that we audit every teacher in the building. Like, we look at all of their grading policies. And you know as well as I do, all we're going to discover there is that everybody's just making this shit up as we go. Sorry. But like, we're making this
right.
up as we go, and I call it, education's dark, dirty little secret that none of us really know what we're doing when it comes to grading. In college, we maybe had a 3-credit assessment course. That's about it. No one handed us the manual when we walked into school the first day. We basically got into our rooms and we decided, like, oh, I guess I have to grade kids now. How was I graded? Right. And then we typically end up grading as we were graded. And then we just go, I mean, I imagine you as I have gone through the full spectrum of, how to deal with late work, from like no late work, right? I'm going to teach these kids responsibility, teach them a lesson, to like, okay, I'm going to take 10% away per day that it's late, or I'm just going to offer 50%. I mean, like, we mess around and mess around and mess around because we don't really know what's the best thing to do. And so we just make it up as we go along. And so I had gotten to the point after 20 years, like, I'm really going to make this up, right? I'm going to give kids an A and we're going to explore the realm of learning. And that's really where I have set my sights since then. And I just want to learn more and more in the classroom, right? That's where I want to be when I'm learning with my kids, doing the field work and just trying to make the adjustments. I mean, that's where my whole mantra, do, reflect, do better, comes from. It's like, we can only do so much in each day. We have an opportunity at the end of that day to reflect on it, and we have the opportunity to do better the next day. And that's how I'm kind of living my life right now. And I told my seniors, we're doing this not 180 days this year. We're doing it one day at a time, 180 times.
You struck a nerve about making stuff up. When I was at a normal high school, I wasn't at a vocational school that encompasses 8 districts. I taught government and economics for 12th graders. They were 2 half-year courses. They took them the whole year, and they had to have them to graduate. And I got so tired at the end of the year, even the smart students knew, or not the smart students, the ones that receive better grades,
right,
play the game.
Once you played school well, right?
Yeah, they stopped turning stuff in because they know they're going to pass. Right.
Yeah.
Or we had a service learning project with so many hours, and they wouldn't turn it in because they know even if a 0 on it, they're going to pass. So I started there were 5 assignments throughout the year that you either got 100 or a 0, but I didn't give you a 0 if you didn't do it right away. You got an incomplete.
Nice.
And that means you now can't graduate because you have an incomplete, but you have to do it to get the 0. So they just started doing the work because they're like, wait, now I'm doing it and I'm getting, no, you right now you have an incomplete. If you want to do it 5 years from now, come back. And, I just made that up as I went along. But logistically, you couldn't do that with every assignment, right?
Right.
And now at the place I teach now, I've gone back and forth, half credit, no credit for late work, right?
Yeah.
Anymore, we have due dates, and if it's a major assignment, when they turn it in, they turn it in. And it's funny, the biggest pushback I get from some kids is the kids that did it on time.
Yeah.
They're like, well, why did they get to turn it in late? I said, yeah, but you've already done it. So what do you care? So when you were out at the basketball game tonight, they were up till 1 a.m. doing their assignment. They traded off their time earlier than you. And again, I only have 16, 17 kids in a classroom. So logistically, I can handle that versus 5 periods of X amount of kids, right? But
yep.
I don't know what's better, but they do the work. And isn't that kind of what we're all about at the end of the day?
Yes. Yes.
So when you said we make stuff up, I think any teacher that's been around for 20 plus years has made plenty up, even if they don't admit it.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I feel badly for those who are entering the profession, because I wish Twitter and other things had been around so I could think about these things early in my career, not 20 years after being frustrated. And so I worry about them, but I'm also grateful for them because I think that there are more people talking about it. And it's not like you're worried that you're the only one who doesn't really know what you're doing, right? Like when it comes to grading, this is like, and so I hope they find some liberation, maybe some surprise, because I still think they thought they were going to show up and we were going to hand them the "This is how you teach" manual, complete with many appendices on grading, which just doesn't exist. But they have an opportunity that we never had, and I think that's to learn early on that it's okay that we are all making stuff up. But as you're making stuff up, just make sure that it makes sense to you. It makes sense to your kids. It makes sense to your parents. All right. Because really, what grade should be your communication, right? Like it is just a form of communication. And that's why I don't even call with parents. And with my kids, I don't call it my grade book. Yes, it's a grade book. Yes, we have an online. We use Skyward out here in Washington primarily. I know that there are other iterations of that. But I don't call it my grade book. I call it our learning record because it keeps record of the learning that we're doing. And I know that sounds like, okay, it's semantics. Of course it's semantics. I want kids and parents to think about this whole experience differently. I want them to see that it's something that they can build, something they can add to. It's not deficit grading. It's not you get penalized if it's not in on time. Yep. It's not you get penalized if on the first attempt you didn't make it. That's just not how it works or should work. And so I do what I call open grading right now, where essentially a kid can improve anything and everything as long as their will is there to do it. I am open. I am not guarding any gates any longer when it comes to protecting grades. I look at two things when I make record of student work: completion, and that's just critical completion. That's just not like ordinary everyday practice. Like you need to, because there's a certain amount of doing required to learning, right? And so I do completion scores, and I do that because I want them to see if it's not done, you haven't gotten the full benefit out of that yet, right? And so I leave it wide open. If Paul didn't get it done when it was due, I might put in the record it's somewhat complete or partially complete, but Paul always has the option to go back and complete that, because who cares when it's done, right? I mean, I just want it done. Otherwise, it has no real value. If it's not, if it's valuable to do on Monday in terms of learning, why is it any less valuable to do on Thursday? It's more a matter of my convenience. And I learned a long time ago that teaching is an inconvenient profession. I got over that.
Yep.
And so I let my kids complete work anytime. It's an open thing. They can always add to it. And what parents see, either it's done, it's not done, or it is done. And I only use 3 scores. I use a 0.6, a 0.7, and a 1. A 1 is done. Either it's complete, or if I'm using it for a performance, they have satisfactorily met the criteria for the particular priority standards or standards that we are using for that performance. If it's a 0.7 and it's a performance, there is feedback on the table for the kiddo. So if it's a performance, Paul, you didn't meet the standard. This is why you didn't meet the standard, and this is what you need to now do differently or better to get there. So Paul has the agency to go back and use that feedback from my response to his work to improve his learning. Yes, it improves his grade too, but I'm doing it so he improves his learning, because there's still work on the table. There is feedback there waiting. So if your dad now, Paul, sees like, hey, I see you've got a 0.7 in Syrie's class, that tells me that he is giving you feedback, that you know what you need to do to improve this. So do it, kiddo. And then a 0.6 is please do. So there's do better, and there's done. Because grades should be about communication.
It sounds like you don't give a ton of busy work either then.
Like, I don't.
If you give an assignment, it's something that you feel they can benefit from. Because that's a trap for a lot of educators, I believe. Like, what's a worksheet? What's this or what's that,
If they, and this is how I do it, Paul, if they don't see how this connects to the end in some way and benefits them beyond staying busy, why give it to them in the first place?
Yep.
And so
I
when people complain, I'm sorry, but when
No, go ahead.
people complain about like you're wasting instructional time, you're not covering enough content, how much of that content in classrooms is just busy work in the first place? And so while you're keeping your kids busy with something that you're just using to put points in the grade book, I would rather be talking with my kids.
Yep.
That is why I spend the time that I do with Smiles and Frowns. That is why I spend the time that I do with the daily discussions. Because if we can't learn with and from each other, I'm not sure that we can learn to live with each other. And so at no other time in our young people's lives will they have the opportunity that they do in American public education to sit in a room full of different people from different backgrounds to learn with and from each other so that we might better live with each other. That is what I care about.
Right. And I can already tell, regardless of what assignment you give, it doesn't have to be difficult or hard to learn. Like
Yes,
I, I, I,
meaningful.
I pick on AP teachers a lot because let's face it, you don't know what the exam's going to be on, right?
Right.
So what the average, I'm not speaking for every single AP teacher, they bombard the students with assignment after assignment after assignment and show them how hard the class is and how much homework there is. So when they don't get that 3, 4, or 5 on the test, hey, it's not my fault. We worked our tails off in here. Well, no,
Right.
you
Right.
bombard them with a lot of stuff some of the kids probably didn't see the relevance in, might have been better off having those discussions. But I think
Yeah.
it makes a teacher vulnerable because what will parents and school boards say? Well, gosh, the workload wasn't that difficult. How do smiles and frowns help a kid pass an AP test? And I've kind of comparing apples and oranges with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But the discussions and meaningful debates and things you don't necessarily have to grade might tip the scales for somebody taking that exam, right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
you set yourself up by bombarding the students with the workload, and then you can tell everybody you're hard, you're difficult, the kids are lazy, they don't like doing the work. When who wants busy work?
Yep.
So I love your aspect. I want to touch base on one more thing.
Okay.
Cell phones. How do you handle cell phones in the classroom? Or
Oh,
is it a
isn't
school policy or
no, 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 no. Thank gosh we don't have a school policy. We don't, and we have a new principal, and I love him. And there's been so much desire from the staff to go to a building wide phone policy. And we had him last year. It was his first year. He wasn't going to make too many waves, and I didn't really know what to expect as we came in this fall. But he poo-pooed the school-wide policy almost right away. And there are a number of reasons for why he poo-pooed it. It's almost impossible to set, and even more impossible to police. And so it's an ongoing saga, Paul. But I've come to the point where they're a part of life. They're going to be a part of life. They're probably going to become a greater part of our life. And so, how do we learn to live with them in our lives as children, as adults? And so really this year, more and more, it's about how do we confront the question, how am I going to manage my phone? And so my kids and I have lengthy discussions about that. As a matter of fact, in my classroom wall right now, there's a please do and a please don't when it comes to managing your phones. This was just a brainstorming activity that we did last week. And what the kids and I are doing is we're coming up with our criteria for what managing your phone looks like. I thought I was gonna take a harder line, Paul, and I was gonna do a no phone zone and a manage your phone zone, right? And I don't know if it's I'm a big softy, but I've kind of shied away from the no phone zone because I want to live in a classroom. I want to teach in a classroom. I want to learn in a classroom where we can have honest, authentic conversations about that which is not going to leave our lives anytime soon. So how do we learn to manage that? And so I solicit help from the kids. And I don't like to play cell phone policeman. I hate doing that. I give lots and lots and lots of gentle reminders. Our big thing this year is being present, right?
Yep.
And so not just a seat in the classroom, but being present, being active and attentive in the learning that we're doing together. And so it really is a touchstone for us. It's something to go back to. It's an anchor where I can ask them, or not even ask them, but just say, hey, this is a time that we really need to be active and attentive. We need to be present. All right. And if we're on our phones, that is not happening. I model that. I put my phone away. And then I just give kids reminders. And I don't think there's a magic answer out there. I just think it's like we have to learn to manage them. And I think that having the kids be a part of that conversation has been really important this year.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. What I find with the students, they feel like they have to respond when somebody texts them or when
Yeah.
somebody calls them.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
first time tomorrow's our first day of classes in New York, by the way.
Oh,
So yeah,
okay.
so we start a little late. So as I was prepping today, I usually have my wife or daughters call me tomorrow during class, and I'll keep the notifications on so the phone rings, and the students will just be looking at me, and I'll just keep talking away, and it never fails. By the third ring, your phone's ringing, pick it up, and
Yeah.
I'm like, but I'm talking to you right now. Like
Yeah.
they'll call back, they'll leave a message. And I tried. I mean, that's a stage example. I hope no students watch this podcast now, but and then
Well, but
no, so then I have an area where we start the day setting our phones, but the class I teach is called Innovation, Leadership, and Business. And I have kids that have started their own landscaping companies and other things, and they might get a call from a client during class. And who the hell am I to say you shouldn't take that call right now, right? If we're doing group work. So they always have access to them, but I try to separate them physically just a little bit, right? If somebody goes and grabs it or, checks a message. There's no right way, like you said, but you
yeah.
can't just say, I don't think you can just say no. I just don't think you can.
I don't either, and I don't think parents are going to let us just say no. I mean,
No.
I
They're the
know.
biggest problem. It's always mom and
Yes.
dad texting and calling half
Yeah.
the time.
Yep. Yep. And I know there are schools who have school-wide policies, district-wide policies, and they can have fun with that. I mean, seriously, and they can pat themselves on the back, but like, at what cost, really, is it? To have to be. There are other things to get to, and we can manage our phones. We're big people. We can
Yep.
do that, and if we start treating kids like big people, they will step up to the plate. And and I don't know, Paul. I wish I knew the answer to the cell phone question. As I said, it's an ever evolving saga, and we just got to learn to do the best we can with the time we have. And I just want kids to be present. And if they're living in the future worrying about some notification, they're not being present. And I want them to live in their life, in their moment. And I'm just trying to create that environment for them a little bit, so where they get to make big people choices.
Being present is so important for any human being today because it's
Yeah.
so easy to compare yourself and to see what everybody else is doing. And I
Yep.
think it can put you in a bad place when you don't realize if you just stay in the moment, how much special is happening in your life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Easier, listen, if there's a magic pill, we wouldn't be talking to each other right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
so,
But I think zero tolerance policies are not the way to go.
no, I agree. So explain Project 180.
Oh boy, that's another 5 or 6 episodes.
Yeah,
So
well, we'll have you back, but
okay, I would love to be back, Paul. So Project 180 really was that year that I decided to give kids an A, and I had a blog. I still have a blog. Let's change education.com, and I started journaling basically through my daily blog on how that experience was going, and sharing that with people. And it became year one, and then it became year two, and so it became Project 180, mostly because as I put on the book, it fits education in a number of ways, and it fits learning in a number of ways. One, we typically have 180 days of school.
Yep.
Two, and this is really where Project 180 got its grounding, is if we flip things upside down, we do a 180, right? Like we've turned things 180, and so by approaching grading the way that I was hoping to turn education upside down, because if we're upside down, we got to get right side up some way. And so, and that's kind of where do, reflect, do better came from. Is like, I'm always looking for ways to turn myself upside down so I can figure out how to get myself right side up. And this is where kind of the idea of better came from, is that, I thought if I turned education upside down and did this for 2 years, I was going to come out of it with some wonderful data on how to change education. And all I really discovered, Paul, that was right in front of me all along was better. All I can do is better. It's not about becoming great. It's not about becoming good. It's not about fixing education. It's just about an intentional effort to make education better. And that's really what Project 180 is about. And like I said, I'm always leaning on learning. Like, how can I figure out to make the learning experiences more meaningful and more valuable for my kids? And unfortunately, I end up grinding on grades a lot because, again, going back, those tend to get in the way. And so Project 180 is really just about, let's be introspective and reflective about our practice. Let's be willing to step outside of our comfort zones. Let's be willing to learn and use that experience and that outcome to make our next day better, with by full knowing that we're going to be upside down again. It's just kind of this constant motion, 180 degrees at a time, upside down, getting better, upside down, getting better. And that's really just do, reflect, do better. And we just keep rolling and moving through our experiences with kids.
Next time you come on, now we have to have you on again. I'll get into my yo-yo philosophy too, because
Okay. I love it.
I'm gonna steal the flip things upside down and use it in the classroom in my opening talk tomorrow, just so you know.
Okay. Okay.
I
I
wish
love that.
I wish we were in the same school together. I mean, I love your philosophy. I love what you're doing. It sounds like building relationships with kids trumps everything at the end of the day. Curriculum takes care of itself. Everything takes care of itself when they trust you and they know you're authentic. I mean, and
Yeah, but,
that's what I got out of these 50 minutes.
yes, and relationships aren't accidents, Paul.
Right.
They, as with anything important, require our attention, require our love, and we have to nurture those things. And so, as I think about a lot of the teachers going back tomorrow and or the last week, we tend to sometimes think that relationship building is doing a couple of icebreakers on day one or day two or the week. It's like it's a daily, every day, all year long effort to really connect with the kids in the classroom, and not just teacher to teacher, but student to student, or I mean teacher to student, but also student to student. It's about creating connections in the classroom, because that's where communities and how communities are formed, I believe.
And there's no right or wrong way. There's a lot of mistakes made along the way. There's a lot of admittance to those mistakes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, do, reflect, do better.
Yeah.
That's relationship building.
And isn't that authentic learning? I mean, like we're being honest with each other. It's like, it's messy, and we're human, and we're gonna make mistakes. Let's quit putting on airs and think that it's something other than what it really is. And that's just humans coming together to grow. That's really what education is or should be.
Humans coming together to grow. I think that's a great way
That's
to
it.
end it. Tell all the listeners where to find you on Twitter. Is that your biggest form of social media, or do you have
Yes.
do you have a
Yes, it
website?
is. Yeah, it is. So Monte Syrie on Twitter. I do have a blog, www.letschangeeducation.com. I do have a book out there. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, through Codebreaker. It's called Better: A Teacher's Journey. And so I'm not trying to make a cheap a plug here,
Please
but
do.
it really does capture the journey of the 5 years of Project 180 and beyond. So,
Monte, this was great. We have to have you on again because you need
I
to
would
meet
love that.
you need to meet my partner Matt. He's the evil business owner with all the franchises, that
Love it.
thinks schools for a different reason. No, I'm just joking. He's one of my students' biggest mentors, and comes in the classroom and practices what he preaches. But
Awesome.
I can pick on him a little since he wasn't here today. So
Okay. Okay.
thank you.
Awesome.
Hey, good luck with the rest of your school year. This won't be the last time we talk. I don't know where, when, or how, but we'll make it happen.
Okay. Thanks, Paul, for having me,
Hey,
and have a great first day tomorrow.
thanks, you too.